Something is fracturing behind the curtain. And you can hear it in how the voices are shifting. Not the critics, not the comedians. Inside Trump's own orbit, the tone has moved from loyalty to blame, from confidence to disorder, from control to panic. And the cracks are no longer hidden behind slogans or press conferences. They're spilling out in public, live, and unfiltered. Here's the moment you need to understand first. This isn't Trump versus Democrats. This isn't Trump versus the media. This is Trump versus reality. And reality is starting to win. Over the past few days, senior figures inside his own administration have begun turning on each other in real time. Accusations, finger-pointing, deflection, officials contradicting one another on live television, each appearance more frantic than the last, each explanation unraveling faster than the one before it. And while that implosion is happening, something else is unfolding just as dangerously for Trump. Comedy stopped being comedy. Jimmy Kimmel and Whoopi Goldberg didn't just joke, they diagnosed. They held up a mirror and refused to look away. And the result wasn't laughter alone. It was exposure. What happens when a leader who demands constant praise starts being talked about like a liability instead of a strongman? What happens when the narrative shifts from powerful to unstable, from decisive to unraveling? You could see it on Trump's face in the aftermath. The social media meltdowns, the late-night rants, the obsessive need to respond. He wasn't controlling the story anymore. He was chasing it. And chasing always looks weak. Meanwhile, inside his administration, the wheels were coming off. Public statements contradicted private briefings. Cabinet officials blamed senior advisors. Senior advisors blamed law enforcement. Law enforcement blamed miscommunication. No one took responsibility. Everyone protected themselves. That's not strength. That's a collapse pattern. And here's where the tension spikes. Because while Trump was spiraling online, Whoopi Goldberg did something far more dangerous than mocking him. She stripped away the myth. She reframed him not as a leader under attack, but as a man obsessed with attention, praise, and grievance. A man insulated by handlers who treat him like a fragile asset instead of a president. That framing landed hard. Once people start seeing patterns instead of personalities, everything changes. Every outburst feels predictable. Every denial feels rehearsed. Every tantrum confirms the diagnosis. And Trump felt it. You don't lash out this aggressively unless the message hits a nerve. You don't threaten networks unless the audience is listening. You don't melt down unless control is slipping. This wasn't just another bad week. This was the beginning of something worse. Because when comedians start saying out loud what insiders whisper privately, and the insiders start confirming it by turning on each other, the illusion doesn't just crack, it shatters. And in the next part, we're going to break down exactly how the internal blame game exploded into public view and why Trump's response made everything 10 times worse. Because once the chaos goes public, there's no walking it back. The moment everything truly slipped out of Trump's control wasn't a speech, a rally, or even a court filing. It was the blame. Raw, public, unfiltered. When senior officials started pointing fingers at each other on live television, it sent a signal that insiders immediately recognized. This wasn't strategy. This was survival mode. And survival mode means everyone is looking for an exit. One cabinet member blamed a senior aide. That aide blamed law enforcement. Law enforcement blamed faulty intelligence. And suddenly the story wasn't about policy anymore. It was about credibility collapsing in real time. Here's the quiet truth about political power. Once people inside the system stop protecting the center doesn't hold. Trump's administration has always operated like a pressure cooker. Loyalty rewarded, dissent punished, fear used as glue. But fear only works as long as the leader looks strong. The second that strength looks performative, people defect. And defect they did. While this was happening, Jimmy Kimmel did something devastatingly simple. He stopped exaggerating. He stopped yelling. He just replayed the footage, the contradictions, the reversals, the promises that evaporated on contact with reality. That's when the laughter changed tone. Because humor is disarming, but repetition is lethal. Once audiences see the same behavior loop over and over, the denial, the blame shifting, the grievance, it stops being funny and starts feeling exposed. Then Whoopi Goldberg stepped in and the conversation escalated. She didn't focus on ideology. She focused on behavior, on how Trump is handled, on how decisions appear filtered through ego, gratification, and impulse, on how aides don't challenge him, they manage him. That's a dangerous reframing. Once a leader is seen as someone being managed instead of someone managing, authority drains fast. You don't argue with them, you placate them, you distract them, you redirect them, and people watching can tell the difference. Trump reacted exactly how someone losing narrative control reacts. He lashed out. He threatened networks. He obsessed over coverage. He posted at all hours. He couldn't let the moment pass because the moment was defining him. And here's the thing his defenders can't explain away. Strong leaders ignore late-night comedy. Weak leaders try to silence it. Inside his own circle, that reaction triggered alarm bells because every threat brought more attention. Every rant confirmed the framing. Every attempt to intimidate made him look smaller, not bigger. Meanwhile, the internal chaos deepened. Officials stopped coordinating messages. Talking points contradicted each other. Interviews made things worse instead of better. And behind the scenes, allies started asking a question no one once asked out loud. What if he's becoming a liability? That question changes everything because once it's asked, loyalty becomes conditional, support becomes transactional, and silence becomes strategic. Trump didn't just lose a media battle this week. He lost control of the rhythm. He was reacting, not dictating, defending, not attacking, explaining, not commanding. And that's when power starts leaking fast. But the most dangerous moment hadn't happened yet. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about the line Trump crossed that made even longtime allies uncomfortable. The moment when grievance turned into something darker. And once that line is crossed, there's no pretending this is just noise. Here's where the story stops being about embarrassment and starts being about danger. Because there is a moment when outrage turns into instability. And that line was crossed when Trump began framing criticism as persecution and authority as something owed to him personally. In the aftermath of Kimmel and Whoopi segments, Trump didn't just complain. He escalated. He spoke about punishment. He spoke about retaliation. He spoke about consequences for people who dared to mock or question him. That language matters. Strong leaders brush off ridicule. Fragile leaders try to criminalize it. And that shift didn't go unnoticed inside his own ranks. Privately, advisors began urging him to stop posting, stop responding, stop feeding the fire. Publicly, they smiled and deflected. But the disconnect was obvious. The message discipline that once defined his inner circle was gone. Every new outburst contradicted the last. Every clarification created a new controversy. And then came the quiet part said out loud. Officials began admitting mistakes, not just errors, but failures and blaming each other for them. Once that happens, the myth of control evaporates. Whoopi's framing hit so hard because it connected the dots people were already sensing. The endless need for attention, the constant reassurance, the inability to tolerate criticism without lashing out. That's not a political critique. That's a behavioral pattern. And once a pattern is visible, it can't be unseen. Kimmel's audience didn't just laugh. They recognized it. The repetition, the defensiveness, the obsession with being wronged. Trump's reaction confirmed everything. He didn't counter the argument. He proved it. Every rant reinforced the image of a leader consumed by grievance rather than governance. Meanwhile, the internal chaos turned toxic. Allies started leaking. Not dramatic leaks, subtle ones. Clarifications, context, sources close to the situation. The kind of leaks that don't defend you, they distance from you. That's how insiders protect themselves when they sense a collapse coming. And here's the most telling sign of all. Trump's base didn't rally the way it used to. The outrage was louder, but narrower. The amplification loop wasn't as wide. The moment didn't dominate. It lingered. That's what happens when fatigue sets in. When shock turns into expectation, when people stop asking, "Did you see that?" and start saying, "Of course he did." That's the real danger zone because outrage still energizes opponents, but it no longer mobilizes supporters the same way. And Trump felt that too. You could hear it in the desperation of his posts, the repetition, the fixation, the need to be seen, acknowledged, validated. This wasn't a counteroffensive, it was a spiral. And in the next part, we're going to talk about why this moment is different from every previous controversy, why this one doesn't blow over, and why even people who've defended him for years are starting to quietly prepare for what comes next. This is the part no one inside Trump's orbit wants to say out loud, but everyone is thinking. The old playbook isn't working anymore. The outrage machine still turns on, but it doesn't generate the same power. It sputters. It stalls. And that's because the environment has changed. When Kimmel and Whoopi spoke, they weren't just mocking. They were articulating what millions of people already felt but hadn't fully named yet. That Trump doesn't respond to pressure like a leader under siege. He responds like someone losing control of the narrative. And panicking about it. And panic always leaves fingerprints. You could see it in the speed of his reactions. No pause, no strategy, just impulse. Post, delete, repost, escalate, threaten, then claim he never threatened anyone at all. That cycle used to keep everyone off balance. Now it just looks erratic. Inside Washington, that perception matters more than any single scandal. Because once donors, lawmakers, and media allies begin to believe you are unpredictable in a way that creates risk for them, loyalty turns conditional. And that shift is already happening. You can hear it in the language. Fewer absolutes, more concerns, more questions, more we need to focus on moving forward. Translation: distance. And here's where Kimmel and Whoopi accidentally exposed something even bigger. Trump's greatest weapon was never anger. It was dominance. The ability to make everyone else react to him. But in this moment, he was reacting to them. Night after night, post after post. He was chasing the narrative instead of setting it. That's a reversal. And reversals are deadly in politics because once people sense weakness, they stop fearing you. And fear is what kept the coalition together. The jokes landed not because they were cruel, but because they were accurate. The childlike need for praise, the fixation on slights, the inability to move on. Those aren't insults. They're observations, and Trump confirmed them by doing exactly what critics predicted he would do. Lash out, blame, threaten, repeat. Meanwhile, the administration's internal fractures widened, public finger-pointing, conflicting stories, officials contradicting each other on live television. That's not just bad optics. It's a signal to every external actor that the center cannot hold. And history shows what happens next. The media doesn't move on. Investigations multiply. Allies hedge. Opponents sharpen their knives. And the leader, feeling cornered, tightens his grip instead of loosening it. That's when mistakes compound. That's when small scandals become structural failures. And that's why this moment matters. Not because of one late-night segment. Not because of one rant, but because of the pattern they revealed and the response that followed. In the final part, we're going to talk about where this road leads, why the reaction matters more than the trigger, and what happens when a leader can no longer tell the difference between criticism and collapse. This is how eras end. Not with one dramatic explosion, but with a slow, unmistakable loss of control that everyone can feel at the same time. The reason this moment sticks isn't because Jimmy Kimmel or Whoopi Goldberg are comedians or commentators. It's because they acted as accelerants, not causes. They didn't invent the instability. They revealed it. And Trump's response did the rest of the work for them. Every denial sounded thinner. Every attack felt louder. Every claim of victimhood clashed with the reality of power he still holds. That contradiction is impossible to sustain forever. Strong leaders absorb criticism and move forward. Fading leaders obsess over it. Trump couldn't let it go. He needed the last word, then the next one, then another. And with each attempt to reassert dominance, he looked less dominant. The public sensed it. The media sensed it. And most importantly, his own allies sensed it. The silence from people who once rushed to his defense was deafening. No full-throated counteroffensive, no unified pushback, just cautious statements and careful distance. That's not loyalty. That's survival. And it tells you everything. Because when insiders stop fighting for you, it means they're preparing for a future without you at the center. That's the real exposure that happened on live TV. Not a joke, not a roast, a mirror. Trump saw himself reflected in it, needy, reactive, furious, and instead of breaking the mirror, he argued with it. But mirrors don't argue back. They just show you what's there. And what was there scared him. The irony is that the more he tried to prove he was in control, the more he demonstrated he wasn't. The more he talked about strength, the more fragile he appeared. The more he claimed persecution, the more powerful he reminded everyone he still is. And how poorly he handles dissent. That's a dangerous combination. Because history is unkind to leaders who confuse attention with authority, and outrage with loyalty. This moment won't be remembered as the night Trump got mad at late-night TV. It will be remembered as the moment the spell broke. When people stopped asking what did they do to him and started asking why does he react like this every time. Once that question takes hold, there's no going back. The narrative shifts, the power drains, and the collapse doesn't need help anymore, it carries itself forward.